love, give it all. Give me some love, give me some love, give it all. Give me some love, give me some love, give it all. Baby, give me some loving. Well, na 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 na. something to say to me, then say it to my face. What it's all about, why you're bailing out. Think you owe me an apology. Just say it to my face. You're sorry. You're so sorry. You're so sorry. You're so sorry. Say it to my face. You're so. And I quit my job for you, even quit some friends for you, 'cause you couldn't stand it, me all independent, so you had to have me for yourself. That was when I trusted you, when I could add up 2 and 2, when you promised we'd be together, you, me, forever. Now there's nothing left to lose. And though I understand it's hard sometimes to make up your mind in these trying times, yeah, I just can't accept you leaving me when I'm overseas with the heart so heavy. Think that I deserve the truth for once, not a guilty tone, 'cause you're not
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show.
Today is Thursday, March 10th, 2022. Thank you so much for joining us at the Benjamin Dixon Morning Show. We have been through a lot as a collective people, just wherever you are on this planet watching this. I know we have listeners in Australia, to the UK, here in the United States. We've gone through a lot, and it seems like it's one thing after the other. Right now, it's Ukraine, and we have no choice but to put our energy and our effort into making sure we provide you with the most robust coverage. And for that, I'm glad to have my brother, Carl Mack, Dr. Carl Mack, who has been providing some of the best coverage we've had on this topic. And he's joining me this morning. How are you this morning, Dr. Mack?
I'm good, Brother Ben. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. We started our conversations very early this morning, and I want to, as always, start the show with Black history, because everything that we do, every perspective that we give, Brother Mack, I can tell you, for me personally, since becoming far more acquainted with our history, I can now understand what it is that I'm doing. You know, I understand my trajectory more because of our history. So, hey, Google, what happened today in Black history?
After escaping slavery in 1848, abolitionist leader Harriet Tubman returned to her native Maryland some 20 times to help others secure freedom, leading them as far north as Canada. In the only woman-led attack during the Civil War, Tubman freed nearly 800 additional slaves. Tubman never received pay for her efforts. In 2013, President Obama created the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Monument in her honor. Tubman passed away on March 10, 1913. Adapted from Black Heritage Day 4 calendar by author, lecturer, and civil rights activist Dr. Carl Mack.
You know, Ben, you're talking about, how things line up. And, here today we feature Harriet Tubman. And one of the things that wasn't known about the sisters, that as a woman, she led an attack during the Civil War, and one of the few women that have done that. And I would dare say that we need Harriet Tubman today to go up against Putin. We could probably get this situation resolved.
I hear that, sir. And I think oftentimes when we think about how difficult our current times are, consider what it was to be Harriet Tubman. Without any of the advantages that we have today, fighting against the same viciousness, in fact, even more viciousness towards Black people, because they were seen as shadow slavery. So the type of courage that had to be inside of that sister was something that we definitely can use on the world stage right now.
And so one of the parallels is that, when we talk about the courage of the Ukrainian people, again, try to imagine the courage of Black folk having to fight out of the institution of chattel slavery. And Harriet Tubman certainly exemplifies that level of courage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And momentarily, we're going to be joined by Jeff Sharlet. He is a documentarian, and we're going to be discussing more about Ukraine and Russia and some of the ties that he sees. I had a chance to speak with this brother years ago. He has a documentary on Netflix called The Family. And The Family is this ultra religious. Say that again, David.
Jeff's with us.
Oh, Jeff is already with us. OK, so we can actually since I'm already in the middle of introducing him, I want to bring him back to our show. Brother Jeff Sharlet, documentarian, author, journalist. Good to have you. Last time we spoke, it was only a podcast. It's good to see you in person. How are you this morning?
Good to be with you, Benjamin.
Good morning, Jeff.
Pleasure is ours. I want to begin with contextualizing some of the research that I know you've done before we jump into Ukraine and Russia, because I feel like there is a connection to some of your previous research. Could you briefly tell those people who may not have seen the documentary about The Family some of your work there?
The family is the sort of the oldest and arguably most influential Christian nationalist, Christian right organization based in Washington, and it's distinguished from most of those kinds of formations by the fact that it's not interested in everyday people. It's not interested in mass revivals. They have this idea that they're called by God to organize the elite. So their members are members of Congress, military leaders, and international leaders. And in the documentary on Netflix, actually, the third episode is partly dedicated to the connections to Russia, where they began sponsoring, with Putin's support, an annual prayer breakfast. And now one of the sort of a leading Putin figure named Maria Butina we talked about her because she came to the United States and she sort of got involved with the NRA and the American family, and ended up serving 18 months in jail for spying, but in Russia was considered a hero.
Wow. Now, there's a thread that you have, and I think my signal may be a little choppy. So, Dr. Mack, if you need to jump in there, feel free to. But you are also covering Ukraine and Russia, but I see that you're contextualizing it from the right-wing perspective here in the United States. We've been covering it pretty extensively. Could you draw that connection that you have been on the trail of?
Yeah, I first started reporting on Russia and from Russia in 2013. Vladimir Putin, has been president for a long time, but there was an intermission there. And he came back to power in 2012. And one of the first things he did was pursue a series of anti-LGBT laws. And they were part of building his nationalist project. And right-wingers in the West noticed and loved it and saw it as a model. And that really made Putin kind of a hero to them. And so now, we've seen some figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene and so on who are apologists for Putin. That's part of that whole history of seeing in Putin this idea of a man who is building a white supremacist Christian nationalist nation, which is not quite the case, but it's close enough. And it's why they support Putin. And it's why they look to Putin for cues on how to pursue that project here.
Wow. Brother Matt. Dr. Mack, we lost your audio there. We'll give you a second to unmute yourself. There we go.
I'm back there. So Jeff, to that point of Putin's anti-gay policies, and now there's an NBA star there, Brenda Griner. So what's your take on that? Was it, is that part of why he detained her? I know they said it was about drugs, but, could her sexual orientation be part of why they targeted her?
Yeah, I think that is definitely a question you want to ask because that has become so central. So you have to, we know a little bit about Russian history for a long. In the Tsar's Russia, the enemy within were the Jews, and Putin can't do that anymore. And so he identified queer folks as a new enemy within, and. It goes beyond just sort of saying, well, I'm opposed to that identity. It's this idea that you're restoring, you're making Russia great again by restoring this kind of heterosexual and implicitly white masculinist identity. And so that anybody can be suspect. And so with Griner, I think that's part of it. They want to emphasize a sort of a show trial aspect of it, of anybody could be a threat to the nation, and an individual queer person is somehow in this ethos a threat to the nation.
Right. So Jeff, let me also ask this: when you talk about the right wing side and members of that showing some type of appreciation for Putin, how did you take the former president's comment of his adoration for Putin, if you will, in regards to his invasion of Ukraine?
Well, I mean, there's something sort of more interesting going on, or more psychological, perhaps, in terms of, I think, Trump's identification with a strongman figure. And there's a great scholar named Ruth Ben-Ghiat wrote a book called Strongmen, who's really good on this, and sort of seeing that identification with who are the other big men in the world, and that's who he identifies with, and he admires their ability to do whatever they want. And he said that to us again and again. But, those connections run deeper. I think about this. Here's an example. In Russia, I managed to talk my way into a meeting of a far-right umbrella group. On the desk of the leader of this group, who was in fact actually been a guy who's been involved in being a public spokesman for the invasion, was a little bouquet of miniature flags of the United States Confederate States. Wow. And you couldn't make it any plainer than that. And I said, what are those? Wow. And he said, gift from our American brothers. Wow. And he wouldn't tell me who had gifted him that, but that was the identification that he was drawing, and you could see who was interested in the work he was doing.
Now, just how absolutely crazy this situation is with Putin now and Biden's handling of it. I hate to play supposition, but could you give us some indication of what it would be like, what this incredible situation would be like with Putin at Russia and Trump as president of the United States?
And I know
it's a nightmare you don't want to go into, but if you could.
We're already in the nightmare, right? And I think I'm afraid we will find out in a couple of years, in 2024.
Right.
And I think, we've seen John Bolton, who was a Trump administration official, saying that Trump wanted to withdraw from NATO, and we can have a critique of NATO and at the same time see the problem with that. And I think if this was happening, I think the only thing standing in the way of Putin would be what's mainly standing in the way of Putin right now, which is the brave Ukrainian people. But how long can they stand alone?
Right. I want to dovetail this back to what you were just speaking to, the Confederate States, the tie here to the right wing, the ghost and the specter of the Confederacy. I want to ask a very direct question. Do you believe that there is a faction inside of the United States of America that would hand over the United States of America, even if just ideologically, to Vladimir Putin for the very same reasons, for the anti-LGBTQ stance, for the anti-woke stance, the anti-Black stance, all the things that are represented and embodied in that Confederacy? Do you think that faction is alive and well in the United States?
Oh, yeah, it is. I mean, they're out there and they're public about it. I mean, we have a figure named Nick Fuentes, who's leader of the right-wing Groyper movement, and just held a conference at which we had, I think, 2 or 3 members of Congress speaking. And he is open. He led a cheer for Putin. He sees Putin as a savior of a white supremacist project. But even beyond that kind of obviousness, what's really interesting to me, and I think, are laws like we're seeing in Texas and Florida. Idaho has just passed the first stage. These are anti-trans laws that are modeled very clearly to me on those laws that were passed in Russia in 2013. And they're coming from the same people who just led the anti-CRT, the anti-critical race theory laws. It's the same project. Right. It's the exact same project. And it's a project. And I think what a lot of liberals have not, and some lefties have not understood, is they see these projects, they see these laws as horrible, right? But they see them as narrow. And as in Russia, they're not narrow. They're meant to be the laws of broad control, to terrorize folks, to push queer folks into the closet, to make the speaking of race a crime, and to make everybody wonder where the line is. The vagueness of the law is deliberate, and that comes from the Russian model. That is actually what they did in Russia in 2013. And it's a kind of a classic totalitarian move to make people wonder when they're in danger.
So Jeff, given what you're describing, which clearly is a threat, and I've heard Brother Ben talk about this threat of democracy in this nation, but given all of that, what is your take on how NATO is responding to this invasion of Ukraine? And what do you think that NATO should be doing if they're not doing enough?
Oh, I'm very careful about not commenting on military matters that I don't that I'm no expert on. I think, like everybody, obviously, I'm concerned about the risk of nuclear war. I think we're in a kind of a terrible situation right now. There's not going to be a good outcome, and I am afraid that the Ukrainians are going to suffer quite a bit more. What the end game of this is, I think it's just impossible for anyone to see. I think we're all hoping, obviously, that something will happen within Russia. I will say this, and I think this is, I wouldn't even use the term silver lining in a situation where so many are suffering. But what we've seen in Russia is we have this figure who is kind of recognized by the global fascist moment as the sort of supreme figure. And his invasion has been incompetent. It's incredibly destructive, but there's no way you can sort of see it as this glorious invasion. And that's a serious blow against fascism everywhere, because fascism thrives on the illusion of competence, the strong man who can get it done. Well, Putin's not getting it done, and I think that's giving people pause, including fascists elsewhere, is giving them pause everywhere. And if anything has a chance of denting Trump's chances in 2024, I think this unexpectedly might be it.
And so let me ask this question, and I always like to do this with our viewers. We use terms like communism, authoritarianism, fascism. So in its simplest way, can you explain to our folks fascism?
Fascism, I take my definition from a historian named Robert O. Paxton and a really useful and accessible book called Anatomy of Fascism. Fascism involves a kind of a myth of a singular nation, a nationalist myth, right? It always has some kind of racial element, although that can change, and it might not be as specific as the Nazis and their anti-Semitism. But the sort of the white supremacist nation, that's obviously going to be part of it. It has the key things that sort of differentiate it from other right-wing formations in the U.S. past is it has a cult of personality. The idea of a singular strongman leader and that he alone can fix it. And that's Trump. And then it's got this idea of violence, that we somehow come into our true being as a nation.
Okay.
And the reason I wanted you to explain that is because now folks get a chance to understand, when you look at, at our past president, he fits that. He's a quintessential example of that, to the point that, as Brother Ben said, should Trump get into office again, he would not be surprised if Trump tried to adjust the Constitution in a sense that he's now like a Putin, or he's now like a Xi, where he could be president forever. And so by your quintessential definition of it, I think it gives our people a lot better understanding of fascism and its dangers.
There's no question he'll attempt to do that, and he's told us. I for Vanity Fair magazine covered a number of Trump rallies last year, or in 2020, and this was something he'd always do. He says, "I'm going to be president for 4 more years, maybe 12 more years, maybe 20 years," and then he would do this little move. He'd say, "Oh, I'm just joking," and then he'd say, "No, I'm not." Joking, not joking. And that's sort of his rhetorical move for moving an idea into the mainstream.
into the discourse. Listen, while we have some time left with you, I want to tie this back now, because you said something critical there. You said some of the differentiating, the differences between this global fascism, white nationalism in the form of Vladimir Putin, and somewhat on the domestic level is the cult of personality. I wonder with evangelicals, because this is really, and I know you've done quite a bit of research here, with evangelicals, is there really a strong faction that's willing to go? I guess I'm answering my own question. They worship Trump. I don't know if you remember. Did you see the golden images they put up of Trump? So I'm answering my own question as I ask it, but it feels like there is a betrayal of their faith in exchange for political power that's happening amongst evangelicals here in the United States. Would you concur, and how far do you think that goes in context of how important faith is to the same people?
Yeah, I would concur, and I'll say even in my book, The Family, upon which the Netflix series is based, is a chapter called The F Word, and the F word is fascism. And in it, I argued that although there's so many really ugly political formations in the United States, that kind of European type fascism wasn't possible here, precisely because of Christian fundamentalism, because of people who, no matter how far right, they would never substitute a living person for Christ. Well, I was wrong. They have embraced the cult of personality. The evangelical right has purged from its rank those who would not go along with that. And so now we have all the conditions. The conditions are here, and we're starting to see it move with these laws, the anti-CRT laws, the anti-LGBT laws. This is, the Idaho law. Look at that one that just passed yesterday. It makes it life imprisonment for a parent who takes a child out of state for gender-affirming medical care. Life imprisonment.
Wow.
That's state violence. That's serious.
Jeff, and Dr. Mack, if I could just give you this to, I haven't had a chance to say it on the show, but we're tracking two pieces of legislation, one in Alabama and one in Louisiana, that is redefining murder and giving a way for counter protesters to kill protesters. It's having a chilling effect as it's passed. So these fascistic laws, they're spreading around the country. Dr. Mack.
So Jeff, I got to ask the question, and I think your research is brilliant. Your insight is absolutely enlightening. What personally put you on the path to do this level of research and study?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, who knows? I grew up the only Jewish kid in a small town, and that wasn't fun. I tell you that. And
speaking to black men, so we understand things like that.
Exactly. Say an all-white town, and a town that enforced that to a certain extent. And so I just saw it, I just saw it and grew up around it and wanted to understand it. And that's the thing. To me, it's always, I want to understand how people could imagine that they're doing the right thing when they're pursuing these policies of extreme harm. It's what's fascinating to me are the Russians right now who believe that they are doing the right thing in Ukraine. They can look at those pictures and say, yes, that's good. So I'm not as interested in the people who just nasty and evil and enjoy pain. I'm interested in the people who are so deluded they believe they're healthy.
And so, Jeff, let me ask this. Am I being too simple when I think, obviously, there's no doubt to me that there's been an uptick in this type of behavior? Am I wrong to believe that this happened as a result of the election of the first black president to the United States?
I don't think so. I don't think we would have Trump. I think all those movements were there. The growing sort of fascist. I think the real actually turning point for the growing fascist movement would be probably 9/11. But had not Barack Obama been elected, I don't think they would have been able to capitalize on that. And you even see it when you go and you cover Trump rallies, what's always interesting to me is that you encounter a lot of folks, a lot of white people who actually did vote for Barack Obama, and now they're ardent Trump supporters. And the shift in their mind, they feel like they have done their anti-racist work for their entire life because they voted for Barack Obama. And having done that, they're now free to give voice to all their own racism. Like, well, I got to balance that out, you know? And it's almost they're voting for Trump because they voted for Barack Obama. They weren't transformed by that.
And so for you, the two pivotal points were 9/11 and the subsequent election of the first black president. Those would be at least two key factors that we've seen to lead to this type of uptick.
I think so. And then I think we'd also obviously want to consider the 2008 economic crash. And you know, to my mind, there's always that kind of thing. Is Trumpism? Is it about race or economics? And I always think, well, in America, a country that's so formed by white supremacy and race, how can you speak of economics without speaking of race? It's not an or question. It's always a both question.
Absolutely. Jeff Sharlet, contributing editor of Vanity Fair, author of This Brilliant Darkness and other books, and the Netflix documentary, The Family. I highly suggest everyone gets a chance to watch that so that they can understand what we're dealing with. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Benjamin. Thanks, Dr. Mack.
We're going to go to a quick break. When we come back on the clock, the Benjamin Dixon Morning Show, we'll be back after this. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Georgia Ford is not with us this morning. She is doing what Georgia Ford does. I am here with Dr. Carl Mack, as always. Brother, it's good to have you back in this segment. We were talking in between the commercial break. There's a couple of things that we want to flesh out a little bit more with Ukraine, but then there's a couple other stories that we want to dovetail into. But since we just got done talking about Ukraine, I did not know Russia. I did not know China's position on it. You have it. What was the latest thing that you got, Dr. Mack, on China's position on what Russia is doing in Ukraine?
So, at one point I heard that China felt like what Putin had done, maybe he had gone too far. But now the latest reports are that China is absolutely in lockstep with what Putin is doing, to the fact that on their closed circuit TV national broadcast, they have said that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is nothing more than a military operation, and then go so far as to say that Russia is invading Ukraine to the standpoint that America is developing some type of biological weapon in China, as if Putin is on a save the world kind of crusade. And so, when you look at the, and I used to call it a communist government, but you have so aptly corrected me that it's more of an authoritarian regime, which is the same as in Russia. They control their media. And so and you got to remember, China has 1.4 billion people who are being propagandized with this level of information, as are the Russians, as to the invasion, what Putin's attempts, what his efforts are around the invasion of Ukraine. And that type of rhetoric is an absolutely dangerous type of rhetoric that is being given. So that's where China sits. And as long as Putin and China are in lockstep, Putin is going to be emboldened. Because if there's an effort to stop the possibility of World War III, it lies, unfortunately, with China as one of the most viable solutions.
Right. And so, I had not gotten that information, but I have been wondering where China stands on this. A couple of things. I do have to point out the fact that they're using America's playbook on America. The threat that America was developing biological weapons or weapons of mass destruction, not the fact that is their claim. The fact that they are claiming that the United States of America is building biological weapons, quote unquote, weapons of mass destruction, comes directly out of George W. Bush's playbook. That said, it doesn't matter. Right now, we know that's not true. And right now, we know if that's the talking point of the state-run media in China, that shows us the alliance is strong between Russia and China on this action. And that changes your calculus when you talk about what a global response will be to Vladimir Putin's push.
And, let's not say Russia and China, based on what Jeff has given us as the definition of fascism. You're talking about two individuals, Putin and
All
Xi.
right.
Those two individuals.
Yes, sir.
And because with those two individuals, based on a government of one man in power in China, one man in power in Russia. And Lord knows if we had the third leg of that stool of Trump being in power.
Donald Trump. Right. And I think that's what they were counting on.
Oh,
I think what Putin was counting on, and I just want to amen what you just said. Thank you for that nuance, because it does make a difference for us to really distinguish between the Russian people, the Chinese people, and the authoritarian regimes that have control over them, just like we want anyone else to make sure that every American is not a Make America Great Again American. Okay, so we need to be able to make that distinction for the Russian people. So thank you for that, Dr. Mack. I think that's important. I want to move in. You were about to get in one more point before we move on to the next story.
No, I was simply going to say, and then think about in this country how many folks voted for Trump. And when we talk about fascism and now the ideology that democracy is very much second to the fact that these people want to believe in this one individual, and their belief in this one individual is leading to anti-gay laws being passed, anti-Black history laws being passed under the guise of, quote, CRT, voter suppression. Let's cut down.
That's right.
Who's not going to vote like us. We are slowly watching America democracy come under a serious, we're not slowly watching, because this is happening.
It's happening.
Right in front of us, real time.
That's right.
It is happening as quick as possible. So all I can say is that for those of us who do not believe that our vote matters, you best trust and believe that what we are watching is about as perilous of a time as this country is going to as we could ever imagine. So when Trump says make America great again, you better think about him in the form of a fascist individual. You better think about him
like Vladimir Putin.
In terms of
That's
a chief, in terms of a man who says, I understand the history of this country, and damn the Constitution, I should be king of America, not president, but king of America.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, we're gonna let's come back to that, because I think it's important enough for us to not let it go. But I do want to bring in this next story you wanted to talk about, and we talked about with Rebecca, the over in Like It or Not, the price gouging aspect of oil prices. I want to play a clip of Senator Ted Cruz from the state of Texas, who is now blaming the gas prices on Joe Biden canceling the Keystone Pipeline. It's an absurdity, but here's the clip. Let's take a look in.
If you look at how Joe Biden started his presidency, he started it with a war on U.S. oil and gas. You know, President Biden tried to say this week, the increase in gas prices is due to Putin. I understand the Russians are the favorite talking point for Democrats. We spent 4 years under Trump hearing Democrats say Russia, 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 and now the Biden White House wants to say all of the disaster of inflation, that's Russia's fault too. The one problem is the facts. On day one as president, Joe Biden canceled the Keystone Pipeline.
Let's be
Dr.
clear
Mack, there you go.
So let's be clear, and I want folks to just use common sense here, right? So think about American society pre-pandemic, the number of people that were driving, the amount of fuel that was being used all over the world. When the pandemic hit, let's call it Mother Earth protecting herself, we saw images from satellites that showed pre-environmental conditions. And we saw those same satellite images because now nobody is driving how Mother Earth started cleaning itself up. But let's just think about it from a supply and demand standpoint. When the pandemic hit, we saw images from New York City, one of the busiest cities in the world. Nobody's on the street. We saw images from Las Vegas, nobody on the street. Hell, all of us could walk around anywhere in our respective cities and see that nobody was driving. Think about how much fuel, how much oil was not being used during that time.
That's right.
And think about for how long nobody was driving. And even today that we're, quote, coming out of this pandemic, there are still so many people who are still working from home. So we are not using today as much fuel as we used pre-pandemic. So from a supply and demand standpoint, what happened with all that oil? They were having oil tankers come here and they had no place to put it because the reserves had been built up to max limits. So now all of a sudden we're in a war that's been going on for 16 days. It's not only Putin's fault that this is happening, but it is capitalistic America's fault. Shell, Exxon, the refineries, Wawa, Sunoco, all of these people are absolutely gouging. You are never going to convince me that with this glutton of oil supply that we had, that now all of a sudden after 14 days, the demand has skyrocketed it that much in comparison to the supply. It just doesn't make sense. But I'll tell you what does make sense is American capitalistic greed makes sense. So if anything, the Republicans, and again, this is nothing more than as Dr. King used the term morass, a complicated situation.
That's right.
And what the Republicans are doing, not only the Republicans, but what capitalistic America is doing is taking this situation. No, I wouldn't blame Putin totally. Putin has his arm in it because trust and believe whenever there's a geopolitical event, Wall Street is going to find a way to capitalize on it. And in this case,
that's right.
They're now using this example to now send gas prices skyrocketing. If ever the members of Congress want to haul some folks in and start talking about gouging the American public, it ought to be the oil companies, the refinery companies, Wawa, Sunoco, anybody who sells fuel ought to be hauled in front of Congress, because you are never going to convince anybody that understands 1 + 1 is 2 all over the world, all over the universe. 1 + 1 is 2. You are never going to convince anybody that the demand for oil has surpassed its supply, its current supply.
Come on.
But what you can convince me of is the greed of man. And we are clearly seeing that played out in gas prices. That's where this
Dr. Mack, let me I think everybody followed you, but I just want to make sure people understand from an academic perspective. When your demand is lower than your supply, when you have more supply than you have demand, your prices go down. The problem is that they're not used to people actually being able to debunk them in real time. Ted Cruz was used to being able to have an ignorant enough audience to be able to get away with that. I want to play a clip from former Obama economic advisor Robert Wolf, who took Ted Cruz to task and made it even more plain. Let's take a listen. Okay, so we don't have that clip just yet. We'll have that in a minute. But the point is when you mention Moraz, they are really used to people not being able to understand 1 + 1 = 2, and that supply and demand really, if we're playing by the system they designed, this doesn't work like this. It doesn't work like this. This is price gouging, and it's clear as day. But apparently, nobody's going to do anything about it.
Ben, let's be real simple here. You got 10 loaves of bread. You got 5 people. The manufacturer of that bread said each loaf of bread is $1. Those 5 people, those 5 people don't have any problem paying $1 for a loaf of bread. But you got 10 loaves of bread. Now you got 100 people. The people who make that bread is now going to say, no, my loaf of bread not just become $20 for a loaf of bread.
That's right.
And if you want that loaf of bread, you're going to pay that $20 for that loaf of bread. That's supply and demand. But if you got 100 people and you got 10,000 loaves of bread, and now all of a sudden you're saying, well, my loaf of bread going to be $20. People like, you done lost your ever-loving mind. I ain't paying no $20.
That's right.
And that it is.
And so then the question is, the question is where are all the people demanding all of these loaves of bread in terms of oil? Like, where's all the excess traffic? Where's all the excess demand for oil? It is not there. So there's literally not a single. And Russia only provides us 1%. The United States only gets 1% of our oil supply. For Russia, it's negligible. Our strategic reserves cover it. So from every imaginable aspect, Dr. Mack, you're telling me this is purely price. This is overwhelmingly price gouging.
Without question, that is exactly what this is. Now, if you can convince me, if data can show me that the driving habits of America is greater than it was before the pandemic, then maybe I can understand this situation. Case in point, when we were in normal times, if a hurricane is coming off coming in the Gulf Coast and it hits the southern coast where you got refineries and those refineries have to shut down, I absolutely get that. I get that, all of a sudden now your supply has been threatened. So they're going to raise the prices because the demand has always been there, but your supply, your ability to supply gas and oil has now been threatened because the hurricane just shut down your refineries. I get that. That is not this situation because the oil reserves are so everybody is full with these oil reserves. And again, you're not using as much oil today as we did before this pandemic hit.
That's right. So, in fact, these prices should be much cheaper. Everyone, this really, the action point is this. Everyone needs to understand that according to the rules that these white folks set up, this capitalistic rules, gas should be tremendously cheaper. It should not even be a question. We should be able to have as much gas as we can afford because we have a surplus supply. But they don't play by their own rules, Dr. Mack. I want to play this clip. We got the clip. Here is the further debunking of Ted Cruz's absurdity. Let's watch it.
All right, so if that's not going to happen, Robert, perhaps, as Peter just reported, perhaps opening up the Keystone pipeline is not off the table for this White House. What did you take away from that?
I think XL is off the table. Let's recall a few things. One, it's the worst type of oil you can have. It's tar sands going from Alberta to the Gulf of Mexico. It wasn't going to really change anything to do with our oil supply. It was to export from the Gulf of Mexico. Also recall that under President Trump, well, let me just fit. Okay, it's not actually debatable. It has nothing to do with oil fields. It's a pipeline, and it was going to end at the Gulf of Mexico. That's a fact. You should look it up. And with respect to President Trump, as Stephen will tell you, only 10% of it was even done under his 4 years. So it's not about XL. It's about how do we become energy independent. I've always been supportive of the all-in energy approach for actually 10 years now.
That's interesting, Steve, because Robert's making the case that it's regional, and the White House is making the case that oil prices are global. So if we increase the overall oil output,
well, we cut her off in her mid-thought, but the point is that some of this is not debatable. The Keystone Pipeline would not have done anything to fix this situation, but yet and still Ted Cruz is using this geopolitical disaster. He's using this war, and he's using the prices at the pump to score some cheap, greedy points for an oil pipeline that would have done more damage than good. What are your thoughts, Dr. Mack, before we move on?
Now, Ben, let me also add another element to this. Who has protected Saudi Arabia? Who has been their the
United States of America. Right. The United States of America. Yeah,
that's right. And so now all of a sudden OPEC, the Saudi countries, where they got great fields of oil, we all understand that. Now all of a sudden they want to, and I believe the request was made for them to increase production. They said, "Oh no, we going, as a matter of fact, we're going to decrease production." So from that standpoint, I get that supply cuts down on them. But see, when you start when you start talking politics right now, I would absolutely remind Saudi Arabia, you need to understand who has been your guard dog here. And so right now in a time when we need you, but then some of the leaders in Saudi, if I'm not mistaken, are very good friends with a certain fascist leader in Russia.
That's right. Two things to that point, Dr. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish that thought.
No, I was just saying strange bedfellows, as Brother Al Rutherford said. Politics makes strange bedfellows.
Absolutely. I want to make sure people understand that there is a global, male-dominated, far right-wing consensus that crosses race, right, and skin tone and nationality, right? There is a fundamentalist, and I know these are big words, but really just angry men with a lot of power who, and you talk about Saudi Arabia. I mean, Saudi Arabia is one of those nations that still is extremely oppressive to women. And don't think about being LGBTQIA. You may not make it out of certain parts of Saudi Arabia alive. And this is just a matter of fact. And so that is where they make good bedfellows with Vladimir Putin because of the attack on everything that's LGBTQIA, everything that is woman, everything that is anything remotely progressive. There is a global right wing, male dominated. And they swap out religions. That's the last thing. It doesn't matter if it's Islamic fundamentalism, if it's Christian fundamentalism, there is always some type of male-dominated fundamentalist system that is willing to wage war to keep their power. And I think when you say Russia and Saudi Arabia having ties, I think that probably is some of their strongest ties, Dr. Mack.
But being even beyond this male-dominated aspect and power, remember what the good book says. Money is the root of all evil. And trust and believe the same thing with Saudi Arabia. They're understanding that as the world evolves technology-wise, and we're looking for alternative energy supplies for the various reasons, trying to save planet Earth, they better get all that they can get with this oil, which is why you're beginning to see them move off and branch off into other forms of income, because their days of oil, if you look down the road, down the road, what's going to happen when we're all, look at what's happening with Ford, with the automotive industry here in the United States. They're investing billions upon billions of dollars into electric vehicles. So it's going to come a day when that oil is going to be as worthless as sand, if you will. So, you know, they're getting all this, they're reaching for that. So through it all,
I'm looking forward to that day.
On top of all the other things that you're talking about, don't forget, with the one common denominator amongst all of these players is greed. Is money. That greed for money.
That's right. That's right. I want to, but we only have a few minutes left here, but I want to go back to a clip that we didn't get to in the first segment. And it is of Senator Rand Paul from the state of Kentucky. And he is, we're going to talk about him again with Professor Adolph Reed, who's coming during Like It or Not. I'm looking forward to that interview. But this first clip, he is talking about the January 6th Commission being a farce, being fraudulent, being an overreach in our authority as an American government. He's saying that the inquisition into the breach of our Capitol on January 6th has gone too far. Let's listen to his own words.
The national media asked me about January 6th, and I can honestly tell you, if this January 6th commission were going after Joe Biden, I would vote against it. It's an abuse of power. The Fourth Amendment says the government can't listen to your phone calls. The government can't look at your phone records and your bank records unless they have probable cause that you've committed a crime. And they don't go to a political group. They go to a judge who's often impartial. Many times you don't know the party of the judge. But even if they're elected by party, they're supposed to rule in an impartial fashion. The Constitution was there to protect us. But January 6th is an abomination. January 6th committee, what they're doing and can possibly do, but this is not the first time. I mean, this goes back to even Liz's, to her dad and before. It's the Patriot Act. It was my father who said, you know what, you're going to vote on the Patriot Act, you're going to say you're going to go after terrorists, but it'll eventually be used on Americans.
Ben, one thing comes to mind here, right? Were there any Americans that were involved in the planning of 9/11?
Not to my knowledge.
When I say American,
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Had American citizenship, right? Right. And so again, when it comes to organizations like the CIA, the FBI, the likes, right? There's a level of intelligence gathering that has protected this nation, right? And they seem to have no problem with that level of intelligence gathering, right? Think back to what they, listening in on phone calls of Malcolm and Martin and Huey Newton, all of our folks. America does what it does. There's a lot of dirtiness that goes on in order to protect this democracy. And so the nonsense that this guy is saying, this just goes to tell you, I mean, there are some cats, man, who just don't make sense to me. And I've always said, man, reason and stupid can't have a conversation. So Ben, I don't even know how to address this situation. We all saw what happened on January 6th. But again, in history, when you go back to the compromise of 1877 between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden, see, after the Civil War, there were federal troops in the South protecting the rights of our newly freed ancestors from the shackles of slavery. They were protecting them because they knew that white folks after the Civil War wanted to seek their revenge on our ancestors. So they had federal troops protecting them. In that deal between Rutherford B. Hayes, and Rutherford B. Hayes was the Republican, and we as black folks were partial to the Republican Party. Samuel Tilden was out of New York, and he was a Democrat, but he was sympathetic to the Southern Democrats down in the South. He said, look, I will give you the White House, but you got to give me something. And Rutherford B. Hayes said, what do you want to give me? He said, I want you to pull the troops out of the South that's protecting those black folks. And Rutherford B. Hayes said, so you're going to give me the White House if I do that? I said, for sure. Paraphrasing, if you will. They pulled those troops out of the South. And what we saw on January 6th played out all through the South. That same scenario played out all through the South. There is nothing democratic about what happened then. There's nothing democratic about what happened on January 6th. And this guy ought to be absolutely ashamed of himself to call himself an American and look at January 6th as if it was a farce.
Yeah. Well, he also is one of those people who, when he caught COVID, instead of quarantining, he went into the pool, the Senate pool, and went swimming with all of the rest of his colleagues when he knew he was positive with COVID. That's the kind of guy Rand Paul is. So if anyone's wondering, and he's an elected senator. That's the kicker. This guy is in the temples of this empire. Go ahead, Dr. Mack.
And Ben, I want to switch over to another story regarding Ukraine, because again, one of my dear loves, Dr. Patton, Lydia Patton. Sent me an article about now Putin has attacked a hospital. And they show, and I think I sent you a picture, Ben, and I don't know if we have this picture, where he's attacked a hospital, and they show a pregnant woman coming out of that hospital being carried by men covered with blood. And so the issue is, when you talk about what can NATO do, and the talk of looking at possible war crimes against Putin, my question is this. If you are watching war crimes happen right before your very eyes, at what point does NATO say, this gives us reason and cause to go in and stop this? Because you are now, look at what Putin has done. He's now attacking hospitals where women and children, are being born. And when he put an attack on that hospital, it killed 3 people. He's attacking nuclear power plants. Ben, had he hit one of those nuclear facilities, and that radiation had gotten in the air, and depending on which way the wind blow, he could have killed out everybody. Everybody would have been gone. So we watched him hit hospitals. We watched him hit nuclear facilities. We watched Putin go in and attack towns that don't have military facilities nowhere around them. So Putin he's instituting a level of war called scorched earth, and we can pick that up later.
Yes, no, that's exactly right. I want us to pick that up later, and we'll get more information on that. David, if you could get that link from Dr. Mack. I agree. These are war crimes. We'll get more information on it. But yeah, short of NATO going in, because like we know, listen, man, that's nuclear wartime. Something has to be done, and there has to be a strategy to stop Putin. But I just got to say, for record, if NATO goes in, that's ball game, because we're dealing with Vladimir Putin and Russia. They got the same number of nukes. It's not a small thing for NATO to go in.
And Ben, let me make this point before we go to a break. For those people who believe, for any of us who believe that something ought to be done and NATO ought to intervene, I'm just asking you to just pause for a minute and just understand this now. If NATO goes in, missiles from Russia, nuclear, missiles from America, nuclear missiles are going to be flying everywhere.
Right, that's why they don't need to go in. We don't need them to go in. We got to find a way to solve this. And this is really the challenge of our day, Dr. Mack. If we're going to go to break, the challenge of our day is, how do we stop a man who's willing to use war when our answer to it will cause an even greater level of war? We haven't solved that yet, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. We're going to go to a break. Coming up at 9:15, we'll be joined by Professor Adolph Reed, a brilliant mind. Absolutely love him. DJ Exclusive is out today. He is sick. Y'all show our brother some love in the chat room. Hope you feel better, and we'll see you hopefully tomorrow. Rebecca Azor, she'll be here to join us. Like it or not, it's getting ready to go down. The Benjamin Dixon Morning Show will be back after this.
Baby, you set my soul on fire every morning and every evening. Ooh. And maybe we can't get any higher, but if you like to take a ride, we can discover what we're hiding. Making you move, it sure looks good.
from the turf. I never switch sides, like even when I die, I'ma ride for the squad. Let her ties in the hearse. I've been on the vibe, kinda hard to describe. I'm in between, I'm good and it's fine, but I'm tired of the grind. Then I come alive in the night to realize I'm in the middle of the time of my life. I never so packed for the stack, never lied on the rap. Got a bag from the way that I write it. Queen looking Tyson, through that I survived, doing 80 to the house. Then I hit her to the sky, changed haters on a tirade. Talking to their crib in the face, be still, let that hate stuff fade. We all want the same, we all want a meal in the safe. I wanna live like I'm trying to reach enlightenment. Trail spill from my lips, feel big from the bib. Take a sip till I pass out. Try and get grit, but it don't make sense. Cause you can lose life on this fast route. Yeah, turn thoughts to a cash cow. I might flip that to the glass house. I don't need the accolades, I'm in love with the chase. I just wanna eat, save a spot at the table. Beast with the slap, pin myself on the map. You long with the wind, but we knowing that it's capped. 5-hour flights, couple nights at the flat. To be real, couldn't see me making moves while I'm at. I'm still on the grind, limit time when I chat. I'm burning down sage, keep the demons away. When I write it, give a piece of myself to the page. I don't do it for the praise, love, that's just how I'm made.
Truth in the glass in the mirror. Yeah. Do it at me, old man, tryna pass in the fear. You're the first one to talk, but the last one to hear. Eyes blurry, but I couldn't see that, and he cleared down. Start to feel like I'm on one. Settle in, I'll be here for the long run. I'm a slave for the cash, got snakes in the grass, no brakes on the ad, but it's all fun. We done seen it all, heard it all. Heard enough, give me space before I murder y'all. 10 bad here, I'ma curve them all. 12 missed calls, and I still made a curtain call. Here to light it up, lighten up. Hear him talking, they ain't right enough, tighten up. Everything that I came for, I left with. I don't bang sets, I just bang on the set list. Going past supper when I came for the breakfast. Put me in your prayers, I might put you on the guest list. Young, tell me reckless. Gold in my soul, got the same on my necklace. Light it up, light it up. Light it up, light it up.
Like It or Not with Benjamin Dixon starts now.
Dr. Mack, I think you should try good morning, because I don't normally do it really well. Why don't you try it?
Man, Ben, I got to tell you, man, just the last thought that I had of nuclear bombs going, I'm drained, bro. All I can say is, it's one thing.
Did y'all lose me?
No, am I there, Ben? It's one thing to criticize Biden or NATO. Man, this is a tough situation to be in. And, I offer prayers that God guides all of those who are involved in making very key decisions about how to bring this situation to an end. Because trust and believe, man, there is nothing easy about being in this situation. And I've literally tried to place myself in the position of being president. And what is it, Carl? What would you do? What would you do? The ego side of me says, I'd send folks in and I'd put an end to this nonsense. Well, when you got a fascist like Putin sitting there who just doesn't care, and his ego outstrips, even in this case, if I sent folks in, I know my ego would be at play, and his ego is at play. Man, you start sending nuclear weapons up, bro. There's no way to recall those. You send them. Yeah. And even
Brother Mac, you're 100% right. I was asking you to say good morning. I was saying good morning, but your point is this is what we wanted to come back.
Ain't a damn good morning. God dang. Bruh,
I'm sorry. Let me properly set the stage before I get my head chopped off. Good morning and welcome to Like It or Not, where we're free to tell the truth.
Even if we don't give a damn. I don't know, man. I'm just drained.
I know. Listen. We're throwing an Audible. DJ Exclusive is out sick today, so everyone in the chat room, please send our brother some love. So he's not here. Yeah, get better. Get well soon, man. And we look forward to you tomorrow night with the patron party. So let me do that reminder. The patron party tomorrow night, DJ Exclusive is going to be there. So make sure you're there. I'm going to be there. Rebecca Azor, she's going to join us momentarily. And we're going to be joined by Professor Adolph Reed at 9:15 to discuss his latest work. Now, that said, I did want to use this last few minutes that we had, Dr. Mack, to discuss the fact that we can't just casually talk about some of these things because it leads inevitably, it could lead to nuclear exchanges. And that's what you were saying. Go ahead, Dr. Mack.
But being on one hand, you can understand that. But on the other hand, you're watching the devastation and the taking of innocent lives in Ukraine. And you can't just stand back and do nothing. So on one hand, I look at NATO as a grizzly bear. You have all the members of NATO who have sent out an edict that says, if you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. And that truly is a deterrent from messing with a NATO country, because they have that policy in place. If you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. So there's a reason why Putin ain't invading any NATO countries. There's a reason why Putin don't want NATO surrounding him, because in his fascist mindset of wanting to create a bigger empire and be king of it all, he understands I can't mess with NATO. So it's important that I don't allow. That's why in the early negotiations, he said, do not allow Ukraine to become a member of NATO. So NATO is this grizzly bear, got vicious claws, vicious teeth. But when you sit back and do nothing in the face of this type of criminal act against humanity, you're stripping out the claws and you're stripping out the teeth of this grizzly bear. And now that grizzly bear, NATO, has become a teddy bear. Nothing to be feared.
I prefer a panda to a teddy bear because, it's which reason I put my sweater on today, because I just really, honestly, Bro Mac, it's mutually assured destruction when we start talking that language. Our guest is ready. It's a hard pivot, but I know Professor Reed obviously can speak on any of these issues. I want to bring Professor Adolph Reed. He's an American professor emeritus of political science at the University of Pennsylvania, specializing in studies of issues of racism and U.S. politics. He's taught at Yale, Northwestern, and the New School for Social Research, and he has written on racial and economic inequality. And he has a new book, The South, Jim Crow and its Afterlives. Professor Reed, it's so good to have you back on the show. I know it's been a while. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, good morning, brothers, and good morning to Dr. Mack too. Yeah, I'm doing okay. It's good to be back on, and I've got to say I was, I appreciated listening to the conversation you guys are having about the Ukraine situation also.
Yes, sir. I want to bring you in on the conversation of starting with your book. Most of our conversations that we've had, I'd like to talk to you about the labor aspect, about the class aspects, because you have such a robust critique. When I got wind of this book, I'm like, I felt like maybe this was. Is this different from you, or is this just another extension of all of your other work?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's there's a way that it's different, right? I mean, it's a different kind of writing. It's not the kind of writing that I've really done before, and in fact, when I originally drafted it, like I had to be kind of goaded into putting the personal or the autobiographical stuff in it that's in it. I mean, the book started out. I think in the late 90s, in a free-flowing round-robin conversations that I'd had over a year or two with a couple of close friends of mine. One of them 7 years older than I, the other 10 years younger, both also with roots in the Deep South. And our musings were basically that once, our general age cohort leaves the stage of history, there won't be anybody around anymore with direct personal connection to what the Jim Crow era was and how people lived it on a daily basis. So I started writing around 2002, 2003, pardon me, with no particular objective in mind, and I wrote myself into that wasteland. Too long for an article, too short for a book, and it languished there for a while. And then a number of years later, and my colleague and friend, Professor Barbara Fields, read the manuscript and urged me to turn it into a book. And then my former agent gave me some 12 to 15 specific suggestions, which is the only way I got it done. So in that sense, the book originates in that kind of simple and mundane desire, just to leave a thick kind of record of what the Jim Crow order was like and how people lived under it.
So Professor Reed,
Dr. Mack.
One of the things that I've my explanation to January 6th that I've tried to say to folks, and I'm hoping that you can shed a little bit more light on it, is that we've seen January 6th before, and I equate it to the compromise of 1877 between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden when they they made the agreement to draw the troops out of the South. If you could give us some understanding of give us your take on that situation, because when those troops got withdrawn from the South, those white Southerners, those white, let's call them terrorist traitors, began to do the same thing throughout the South that we saw on January 6th. That's at least my historical take on it. But I'm a student of history. I'm an engineer by education. But I just study history as a love of trying to understand our experience in this country. So if you could elaborate a little bit on January 6th in relation to that compromise of 1877.
Well, I mean, I can. It's an interesting question. I can see the basis for comparison, right? Because they look in some ways comparable, right? I think the ultimate connection, right, between the two moments is that each one of them was a putsch, or was an attempted putsch against or for ruling class power, right? That had smelled the possibility for being able to overturn democracy and put the segments of the society that they believe should be subordinate in a safely subordinate position, right? Because one thing to think about is that, from emancipation, but especially after 1868, when the 15th Amendment was ratified, the planter merchant capitalist class in the South lived in a fear that, from one perspective, seems irrational, of the possibility that black freed people and poor and working class whites would form an alliance against them to take power. But you know how it is, like when you're a ruling class that's accustomed to absolute dominance, like any challenge, any assertion of voice or interest from below, you tend to perceive as a revolution against you, right, against your power. And from that perspective, the planters' concerns, fears, were real enough, right? There was enough evidence of insurgents and more or less successful in insurgency, like the Readjuster movement in Virginia took state power in 1879, and it was basically a movement of black freed people and poor and working class whites, and led, maybe ironically, by a former Confederate general named Mahone. But they elected a governor, senator, and then of course the big and there were numerous little affronts, right, to the absoluteness of the ruling class power that happened along the way, depending on what state you were in. But then the big ticket item was the populist insurgency in the early 1890s. And that led even to a populist Republican fusion government that took statewide power in North Carolina in 1892 and was reelected in 1896, right? So the best way or the most concrete impetus, right, for the imposition of the Jim Crow order was, and I mean as a systematic social order. I don't mean as sort of random practices. I mean as a white supremacist order codified by state constitution and a law, right? Was once the Democratic Party and the Ku Klux Klan, and I've always said to classes that throughout the 19th century and through the first half of the 20th century was an open question as to whether the Klan was what was the underground wing of the Democratic Party, or the Democratic Party was the above ground wing of the Klan. But they were, but they were hand in glove. But they asserted themselves. Well, and once they crushed the populist uprising, that's when they imposed disfranchisement. And it was after disfranchisement that you not only took the vote away from more than 90% of blacks in the South, but from a quarter to a third of whites, depending on the state you were in. And once they did that,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh
no, continue that thought.
Yeah, okay. Well, and once they did that, then they were able to impose the regime that they wanted because they had absolute control, right?
Now, Professor Reed,
from that perspective.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Oh, well, I mean, from that perspective, just to go back to the disfranchisement question for a moment, that I've said about the late 19th century the same thing I've said about with the current moment. That on one level, it's true that Democrats then and Republicans now are set on disfranchising black people, right? And for a lot of them, maybe even most of them, I don't know, I don't really care very much to tell you the truth. They want to disfranchise black people because they genuinely don't believe that blacks should have the right to vote. But the deeper project that they converged around in both instances is that they want to, in the late 19th century, they wanted to disfranchise people who were likely to vote Republican. Now they want to disfranchise people who were likely to vote Democrat. And in both cases, blacks were among the most likely to do the thing they didn't want them to do. So
that's right.
So I've said this about the 19th century. If 60% of the black population had voted Democrat, then white supremacy would have been imposed, but disfranchisement would not have been one of the vehicles for it. You know what I mean? So, so from that perspective, I tend to think more of the January 6th as a kind of as partly a dry run, right, to test the water for being able to do it for real later. And the other thing I think about it is that I learned a few years ago that there's a term of art in pro wrestling called kayfabe. And what kayfabe means is the circumstance that everybody who's involved in the industry, right, knows that it's fake, right? The wrestlers, the promoters, the fans. But kayfabe is the phenomenon such that people who are involved contrive to act all to act as if it's real, right? Because that makes it more satisfying. And I've been viewing that as a metaphor for a strain in especially right-wing politics, like for some time. I mean, people, go out and act out. So that, for instance, like you see how all those people who have gotten arrested because of January 6th were first shocked that they got arrested. And in fact, they were there taking selfies of themselves, right? I mean, just said on some level that they convinced themselves that this was all a game. And if you pardon me, one more digression, I guess, a number of years ago, when Cliven Bundy, when his son,
that's right,
and his and his other guys had holed up in a ranger station or whatever, and they talked all this stuff about how they were going to fight to the last man, and then they were out drilling with some dumb stuff to show that they were ready. One of them gets shot, and as soon as one of them got shot, it's like, oh yeah, I was just playing. I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
I remember that.
If I'm not mistaken, they occupied a federal facility. If I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So we have to think about what would have, because they were negotiating with these white men. So we have to understand what would have been the response had black folks occupied a federal facility.
I think we know the answer to that one, don't we?
But Professor, I'm sorry, but Professor, first of all, I'm just humbled to sit at your feet and learn. But when I think about Jim Crow, in part of my reading, I came across this sister Sarah Roberts, little 5-year-old girl in Boston who was subjected to segregation and wasn't allowed to go to white schools, and she had to walk all clear across town. And her father, Benjamin Roberts, filed a lawsuit, and it was the first lawsuit against segregation in the United States in Massachusetts. Right. Yeah. And as a result of the ruling, and the judge ruled that white folks didn't have to do that. They didn't have to allow blacks to come in, and that it was said that in the South they took that legislation, and ultimately that's what gave birth to Jim Crow. Am I off here? And if so, please help me to understand.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a good question, too. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I think my inclination is, there's a really good book by a legal historian named Charles Lofgren on the Plessy case. And it's on more than the Plessy case. It's an examination of the intellectual, the political, and the institutional environment out of which it emerged. And one of the things that Lofgren finds is that from emancipation, until Plessy in 1896, segregation for black people, and apparently for a lot of white people too, wasn't that big a deal. It wasn't that big a deal in the sense, right? In the sense that what you see, and he focuses a lot on public transit because of the Plessy case. But what you see is at the state level and at the municipal level, the regulation or racial or laws governing racial regulation went back and forth, almost randomly, right? So some states, some states imposed, segregation on rail cars, but not on riverboats. Some did it the other way around. Some imposed the segregation first and then overturned it, and then imposed it again. Some started out without it and then imposed it, and then overturned it. So it was when segregation as a practice, right, it became a national political issue, right, that it took on, but right, the meaning that we know it to have, basically.
And Professor, the reason I said
Brother Mac, if you could, let me hold that thought, because I want to take a quick break. I know Professor Reed, if you could stay with us a few more minutes, sure. I want to dig more into your book. I want to bring in, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, Rebecca Azor is going to be joining us, and we want to talk about this anti-lynching law that finally passed at the federal level. We'll be back after this brief break.
Okay.
Can you slide for a real one? Slide for me, slide for me. Can you slide for a real one? Slide for me, slide for me. Can you slide for a real one? Can you slide for a real one?
Can't tell me nothing. I'm flexing stunting. Eating all my veggies in my pocket, half an onion in that pack.
smell like a phone. Trump be beating, shit be humming. You can hear me around the corner before you ever see me coming. And they know just how we coming. Pants drumming, she gon' bust it open way before I finish thumbing. I can put you on some paper, proper play and teach you something. Got my stones on Himalaya, know I'm out your sucker ducking. Ain't no need for that discussion. Bluffing with the game. About to build a couple million, came with nothing but my name. I'ma twist it, flip it, stick it like a bop it. Tell them stop it, all them haters out of pocket. Let me plug it like a socket, baby. Big on the said what they said part. So I skip straight ahead to the bread part. Tapped out, I'm cool on the chick check. With the kid, know I got the gift paid. Big on the said what they said part. So I skip straight ahead to the bread part. Tapped out, I'm cool on the chick check. With the kid, know I got the gift paid.
Tell me, can you slide for a real one?
Slide for me, slide for me.
Can you slide for a real one?
Can you slide for me, slide for me?
Can you slide for a real one? Can you slide for Baby, say I make him nervous. Maybe cause I'm real on the surface. Maybe cause I'm 10 down where the turf is. Don't get lost in those facades on the guys. You know ain't nobody perfect. I just put the work in. I know what my worth is. I'm living lavish. I'm flossing, bossing a bag and I'm cash off the passion. Out here with my niggas, AV to the casket. We reckless, stay in your lane. I'm on gas till somebody cut the brakes. Cutting off these haters in the heads of the snakes. You're spinning the plan, but you catching on late. And she just sent the emoji, said she wetter than a lake. So I better not flake, take a break, say word. Hit me when you through with that, then we can shift again. My schedule been clear. These niggas see me, they mad like I'm one of their peers. I put that on Sita, so I'm sure it's abundantly clear. I'm hella big on the said what I said. Eyes low off the legal and the red wig. Put the leg room in the roof gone. Man, I came a long way from them deals off the Groupon, right?
Big on the said what they said part. So I skip straight ahead to the bread part. Tapped out, I'm cool on the chick check. Fuck with the kid, know I got the gift paid. Big on the said what they said part. So I skip straight ahead to the bread part. Tapped out, I'm cool on the chick check. Fuck with the kid, know I got the gift paid.
Keep it real with you, I've been in the field in position. Yeah. I've been trail, you can tell by how I feel when you with me. Yeah. Tell me, can you slide for me? Can you slide for it once? Yeah. Tell me, can you slide for it once? Yeah.
Welcome back.
You might think of the menacing style.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Benjamin Dixon Morning Show. We're on Like It or Not. We are now joined by my sister from another mister, Rebecca Azor, who, as always, this is the queen. This is her house. We welcome you properly, Rebecca. And, of course, we are joined again by Professor Adolph Reed. We're discussing his new book, Jim Crow, the South. We'll dig into that a little more. And, obviously, Dr. Carl Mack. Good morning again, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here.
Good morning, sister. Good to meet you.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Adolph Reed. How are you? I didn't get a chance to sit in for the first part of it, but I did hear all the nice gems that you were dropping. So I am happy to be here this morning and sitting amongst some intelligent people, not only my brothers, Benjamin Dixon and Dr. Carl Mack. Yeah, I'm trying to give y'all love this morning, but to my guests as well. So...
No, it's so I want to do this real quick. January 14th is a special day. Dr. Mack, set that up for me. You have Google over there.
Yeah. So Dr. Reed, given that your birthday was January 14th, we'd like to just give you a special Black History moment. Hey,
oh,
Google,
good. Okay.
What happened on January 14th in Black history?
Well, let's see.
On January 14th,
I'd say this, right? That
Dr. Matt, Professor Reed. Hang on. Let's start. Let's start over.
Let's do it again. Help him understand what's going on. See, I didn't do that right. I leave y'all for 2 seconds and y'all just confusing our guests. Get it correctly. Go ahead, Ben.
Well, Rebecca. Rebecca, you're right. Professor Reed, we have something for you. We're gonna play something for you on your birthday. In Black history. So you sit back and relax. Dr. Mack, take the helm.
All right. Hey, Google, what happened on January 14th in Black history?
On January 14th, 1940, politician and activist Horace Julian Bond was born in 1940 in Nashville, Tennessee. He was a co-founder of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Southern Poverty Law Center. In 1965, Bond was elected to the Georgia State Assembly. Publicly opposing the Vietnam War, the Georgia Assembly voted not to seat him. In Bond versus Floyd, the United States Supreme Court voted unanimously in his favor. In 1998, Bond was selected as chairman of the board of the NAACP. Adapted from Black Heritage Day 4 calendar by author, lecturer, and civil rights activist Dr. Karl Mack.
So happy
very good. Now, right, see, I was going to show out because I was going to point out, since Julian was a good friend of mine, that one I knew. And Howard Fuller also had that birthday. But yeah, like as long as, and as long as Julian was alive, we would, we would exchange birthday greetings every year on our birthday. But yeah, that's cool.
I had the pleasure of serving as the president of the Seattle King County branch of the NAACP.
Oh, wow.
And
yeah.
One of my first meetings of Julian Bond was when he came to Seattle to present our branch with the Class 1A Thalheimer Award for being the best branch of the NAACP in the country. So
nice. That's great.
Yes.
Excellent.
I heard it in the background, Dr. Reed. You were like, you said right, and I'm like, oh, he knew this already. You were ready to drop that knowledge. And speaking of your book, you're discussing how the last generation that actually experienced Jim Crow is getting ready to leave us. And to a certain degree, there's a level of history that's getting ready to leave with them. I want to juxtapose that with the latest legislation that is being passed by the Senate. The anti-lynching legislation. Now we're about 100 years removed from the onset of Jim Crow, but here we are just now getting this federal legislation. Give us your thoughts about that legislation at this point in history and history in general.
Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah. It's interesting. I was just talking to a friend of mine about this. This and there's another bill, but. I have mixed emotions, right? I mean, to me, it just feels, well, I'll make the overall statement about context. And this might seem funny for somebody who just published the book that I just published, but I think that our politics has come to spend way too much time looking in the rearview mirror, right? And it's nice, I guess, but it's like 75 years too late. And what often happens is that when things like this get passed is when you don't need them so much anymore. And so it's more of an honorific and a perfunctory thing. Look, I think more Black Americans would benefit much more from passage of something like Medicare for all, or free public higher education than from the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill.
Or the George Floyd police bill. The same, when we talk about police reform, that same type of legislation. And I'm thinking that's absolutely germane given what we're seeing with law enforcement and its dealings with folks of our descent as well as others.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
And I mean, look, and what actually that's another point, because and this makes sense. It's totally understandable. But the way that we tend to respond to hyper policing and murder, police murder, is to focus on the outrage, right, and the outrageous. And it's good to get convictions, right. Well, but it's good to hold police accountable. But I'm sure everybody on this panel knows that the deeper problem is an approach to policing.
Correct.
Right. And something that we as Black people have lost in our political understanding over the course of my lifetime is a sense, like if you go back and look at people who are pushing our movement forward in the 30s and 40s, they all understood that the best way to protect the interests of Black people and to advance the interests of Black people is is to advance egalitarian and democratic interests in the society as a whole, right? Because we're a subset of the society as a whole, and to the extent, because of the history of racism in this country and of injustice and inequality, to the extent that there's bad stuff to be distributed, then we know that we'll wind up getting the lion's share or disproportionate share of the bad stuff. So the best way to make that happen isn't simply to fight to make sure that we just get as much of the bad stuff as everybody else does, but to fight to stop the distribution of the bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, to the extent that the police function under neoliberalism, there I said it, is to contain those disreputable populations that might challenge property, right? That's right. Then that seems to me to be the framework within which we ought to understand hyper-policing on Black people. Because I'll say one other thing about this, right? I mean, there's a kind of flim-flam right out there in a layer of Black American political discourse that asserts, and I just had a brother do this to me on a panel about a year ago, that all Black people are equally in danger, especially all Black men, of being randomly gunned down by a cop. And it's while it's true, right, that if you take, for example, the Black Yale graduate stockbroker, he's going to be somewhat more likely, maybe substantially more likely than his white classmate, to get forced, to get jacked up by a cop. But he's not going to be as likely to be jacked up by a cop as a poor Black person who lives in one of those neighborhoods that neoliberalism is, or the neoliberal policing is all about controlling and containing.
The hood.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just keep it 100. Like we're not going to get. Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah, so I'll say this. For me, with this whole thing, with the anti-lynching bill that's finally passing, the fact that we have finally in our title for this, it's the fact that this has been this has not been something that has been considered before. I know that many people have brought it to the light, have talked about this being something that passes, but the fact that we had to wait till 2022 for them to say, okay, lynching is bad. Lynching is bad. We'll stop, this abuse of authority and, in law enforcement. And, now we'll consider it for you guys. And we'll say, here we go. We'll make it something that is illegal. That's what's crazy to me. Why now? In my mind. Yes. I'm like, what is the difference that made you guys realize, and you guys being America, our American leaders, what was it that was the light for you guys and said, hey, lynching is bad. Now we're done with it. And that's what sits on my head every day.
Oh, yeah, I think the answer to the question is that the horse was out of the barn already. Right. So once the horse was out of the barn, they felt okay in closing the door. Right. I mean, I think that's what that comes down to. It becomes easy. Right then.
Dr. Reed.
So you think it's...
The one thing that
I just want to make sure, Dr. Mack, I just want to make sure I understood that one, because the horse being out the barn, I know a lot of metaphors. Help me land that one, though. Help me understand that one.
Well, I mean, just this one, but that nobody in American society at this point is prepared to openly defend lynching, or very, very few people. Gotcha. I'm afraid the number might be growing, right? But it's safe to do it now, just as Sister Rebecca said, right? And the reason it's safe to do it is that there's no effective opposition, right? Like in 1948, the Dyer anti-lynching bill, and this was in Truman's Congress, couldn't pass with all of the liberal Democrats in it. And it couldn't pass because the Southern Democrats wouldn't let it pass.
Because
they were still committed to lynching.
Right. And I want to give it back to you.
Yeah, and Dr. Reed, to that point, That is one of the things that I think history has been very clear about, is white sympathetic for white criminals. And I'm saying that in the sense of, to those folks in the Confederacy that led this nation out of the Union, they were traitors, and they never should have been allowed to come back into power.
No, that's right. Right.
But white folks, being sympathetic to white folks, allowed them to come back into power. So, you know, so to the point when you see that when that legislation is focused on black folk, in the case of voter suppression, anti-lynching, whatever, it's amazing how our loyalty has been to at first the Republican Party, then it switched over to the Democratic Party. But yet those white folks in there would only go so far. I don't think that we see the level of commitment to our advancement that we saw with, say, a Thaddeus Stevens of Pennsylvania or a Charles Sumner of Massachusetts. We don't see that type of fight today with political, with this political party that we obviously have been so loyal to. And if you could speak to that.
Oh, yeah, I'll be happy to. I mean, first of all, like, I'll say that that I register as a Democrat out of convenience, right? Because I know that when I vote, you know, that's what there's going to be to vote for, right?
Right.
But I don't look at voting for Democrats as a way to save myself, right? I'd say also, well, I'd like to make one amendment to the statement about whites, you know, looking out for whites, which is that, you know, when we mentioned the hood a little while ago about, you know, with respect to this stress policing, I mean, there are a lot of white hoods out there too, and like those people get treated the same way that black people do, and it shows up especially clearly in those parts of the country where there are no black people, right? Right. So, so from that perspective, well, but this also speaks to a pragmatic take on the implications of the point that you made about, you know, white people being concerned when there are white people involved. That to me is a practical reason for shaping the campaign against voter suppression in a slightly different way, right? And also for shaping the campaign against criminal justice reform in a slightly different way. So like when I was a little boy, like my dad used to say that, look, if only black people drank cheap wine and bought Cadillacs, they wouldn't make them, right?
Okay.
Right. But the point is that what we need is what to win is a bigger and broader coalition. And too much of our politics, like in the last, you know, since the Voting Rights Act, frankly, has come to center on making appeals to what's basically upper status, in white people to acknowledge that black people suffer especially, right? And they ultimately don't care because they're playing all of us off against one another anyway. But like if we want to combat voter suppression, then it seems to me the most effective way to do it. And I do a lot of work on the labor movement, so like this is where I am anyway. But it's more effective to point out that what the Republicans are trying to do is to disfranchise everybody who will vote against the interests of rich people, right? And black people become the convenient scapegoat. But the rest of you need to understand that this isn't just about black people. This is about you too, right? And the same thing, you know, with hyper-policing, right? Because it's not just a matter of police being racist and not liking black people. In fact, you know, one way to look at it is that race can function as a kind of shorthand that cops can read either rightly or wrongly as indicating what somebody they can jack up and
get away with it
and mess over and get away with it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember, man, like in the early 70s, you know, right after the successes of the civil rights movement, when I would see cops taking sociology classes or Black history classes, like in a community college or whatever. Partly it was to get like a step increase. But my friends and I used to joke also that it was partly to help them read the cues, the class cues that would help them would distinguish the Black people that they could mess over with impunity and those who might squawk and cause problems.
Wow, that's deep.
It's a lot. It's a lot to unpack with this whole anti-lynching bill. But I think that I know a lot of times on the show we've already discussed Emmett Till, and this is where the bill, is originating from, is from the death of the lynching of Emmett Till. Right. And, the fact that was something that was allowed to happen. And even after that, so many more murders were allowed to happen because lynching was just okay. And that's why I say when I sit here and I think about it, I'm like, how is it that today is the day, or how this particular moment we decide that, lynching is not okay. Over 200 times they've tried to pass this, and America has said no. So I think that speaks to America's values, and I hope that this is not just something that, is good for the leaders in this particular moment, because, right now Black lives matter for people who are running for office. But when they get into that seat, does it continue to matter? And that's, that's kind of like where I'm at with it. I hope that anti-lynching actually means no lynching, but it just is sad. I think I want to take a moment to mourn that, because it took this long for America, who was supposed to be the land of the free, home of the brave. We're supposed to have law enforcement who protect and serve, and we never had that. We being Black people, we didn't have that. And the example was Emmett Till and his mother fighting until her death. You know what I'm saying? For trying to have that conversation about what's happened, what's been going on, what's going on now. And I think that now, it's just, I'm happy that this passed, but I think I just want to take a moment to just mourn the people who lost their lives to lynching. It's crazy to me.
And Dr. Reed,
that makes a lot of sense.
Let me say this, Dr. Reed. I don't take the racial element out of policing. And clearly we have tons of examples. So when you talk about what white police would do to white folks, see, the first thing that came to mind was the Stanford experiment. When people get power and they can use that power. So, of course, I look at that as a power structure. That's just their ego at play right there. But when it comes to Black folks, and even though you talked about examples of, and I so appreciate the fact that you said, yes, all Black men are subjected to it. And clearly, two Black men come to mind immediately. One was Roger Wilkins, when he was prominent in government. And then the other one is James Blake, a professional American tennis player.
Yep.
But all police saw was a Black man. And so you could probably, for those who don't understand what happened to Roger Wilkins and who he was, you may want to elaborate a little bit on what happened to him when and literally his case resembled that of Ahmaud Arbery, because he was simply out jogging and police saw him. And started boy and the whole, he speaks about it. But go ahead, Professor.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, look, I tell you what, I don't have to go to Roger Wilkins. I spent enough time in the back of police cars in my youth myself, and my son, my son also. But see, here's where it all gets kind of funny. And I certainly wouldn't ever suggest taking the racial aspect out of it, right? Yeah. But one of my police experiences was when I was a professor at Yale, and I worked in the office late at night. I was working on a book, and when I left, I took a piece of equipment with me. I can't recall what it was, and it was about 2:00 in the morning, and the Yale cop sees me, pulls into the parking lot, checks me out in not a disrespectful way, and he was a Black Yale cop. And we had our discussion, and he said, I just wanted to check, because you know how it is. And I said, yeah, brother, I know how it is, right? because the campus was right next to a housing project anyway, right? My son's experience was also in New Haven. He and his friend were walking home from high school. They're both Black, both 15. and like they're walking past the Peabody Museum of Natural History. Cop makes a U-turn, pulls up on the curb, snatches them up, puts him right in the back of the car, and he eventually tells them that they'd gotten a report of an incident, right, of an attempted robbery at a food shop that was actually right next to the house that we lived in, right? And when he finds out the kids are 15, he turns around from taking them down to central lockup for processing and goes to the food shop to get an ID. Well, the people at the food shop asked him, so what the hell are you doing with these two kids in the car? Because we made a report of, two guys in their late 20s, and one of them was 6'5". The cop was black, right? And he had a jerry curl, but it was 1984. So
never trust a man with a jerry curl in
but
2022.
The jerry curls was telling that he's black. It was telling us that the juices, the jerry curl juice, all of that. He was black.
Right.
He was black.
But that's not the end of the story, right? So the other kid's mother, and she worked at Yale too, in a staff capacity. We filed a complaint right at the police department. We talked to a captain at first, who was an Italian American, because it was in New Haven, and he was nasty as you could ever want to be to us, and dismissive and threatening. And then about a year and a half later, we found out that he got busted and went to state prison for a heroin ring, which was cool. But when we lodged a complaint, the police department sent out a major whose job was cooling out complaints from the community, right? And not only was this dude black, but his name was Blackman. So Major Blackman was trying to explain to us why it was that the New Haven Police Department didn't ask for as detailed descriptions of suspects in neighborhoods where the suspects would be in a racial minority, right? So I said to him, why not just give them pass cards like in South Africa, right? But then he says to me, well, we're not trying to do, then he says to me, well, we're not trying to do a sociology experiment here. And that's when I referred to him as that word we're not supposed to use anymore, or at least I was supposed to use with a bunch of dots after. But see, here's the thing, right? Yes. And it's not like the black cops who are involved actively, in this kind of hyper policing. Even the black dude who stood by and watched Chauvin kill George Floyd.
That's right. Killed George Floyd.
But that they're committed to, they're trained in, and they have internalized an approach to policing that leads them to concentrate on suppressing the populations that the style of policing that they're trained in tells them that they need to suppress, right? And maybe that sounds like a long-winded way to get to the same point, but the thing I don't like about disparities when I'm in discourse is that it takes as a standard for a just society that black people should be, or people who are black should be messed over in the same percentages as people who are white are messed over. And my ideal of a just society is that black people shouldn't be messed over and nobody should be messed over.
But
right?
Professor Reed, do you think do you think that that's the argument that black folks are making, is that we want to see the same level of junk heaped upon others as it is heaped upon us? I don't hear that that's the argument.
That's not what people are.
We got give us your Dr. Reed. I got to interject only because this got to be the last comment on it. Give us this thought, and then we're going to get out of here. Go ahead.
Right. Okay. And I don't think that's what anybody's consciously thinking. But what I'm saying is that that's the logic of the position that they take, whether they think that's what they want to mean or not.
If the outcome is the same.
Right. So again, as I've said often, with the standard of correcting disparities is that the society could seem just if 1% of the population controlled 95% of the resources, so long as 12% of the 1% was black and 14% was Hispanic, but about half was women and so forth, right?
Yeah. And
ironically, like for most black people, that's not good enough.
Right.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Mack.
If you don't mind, Professor, I'd just like you to give us just one last history lesson in regards to your book.
I should have known not to pass it back to Brother Mack because he was going to ask a question. That's on me. Real quick, Brother Mack. Go ahead, Brother Mack.
Real quick. Your book is Jim Crow. Could you just give us a history on why they called it Jim Crow?
Oh yeah, sure. Jim Crow came from a minstrel character, right? That I think originated probably in the 1830s, right? And it was a way, and it was a symbol for blacks being inferior and acting uppity, and all kind of stuff like that. But really, like there was a regime of codified racial hierarchy, white supremacy in particular, and one of the things I do in the book is explore how people, everybody, blacks and whites actually, but I know much more about blacks, tried to and had to live underneath it, right, within its strictures in the domains of life in which the regulations weren't clear and all that kind of stuff.
The name of the book is The South, Jim Crow and Its Afterlives, a narrative account of Jim Crow as people experienced it, covering the last generation of Americans with a living memory of Jim Crow. The author is Professor Adolph Reed. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Mack, and it's a pleasure to meet you too, Sister Azor, and I hope to see you all again.
Dr. Reed,
absolutely.
I love it.
Well, we're getting ready to... We're going to the after party. Dr. Mack, I don't know if you're hanging for the after party. I appreciate you riding wingman with me for the whole 2 hours. Rebecca, I appreciate you giving us space to do this extended interview with Professor Reed. That's my brother. He's been a mentor to me in this space. So I'm just glad to be able to bring him on this morning. But it is still your world, and we're going to the after party.
Oh.
Let's go to the after. Let's go to the after party.
Baby, you set my soul on fire every morning and every evening. And maybe we can't get any higher, but if you like to take a ride, we can discover what we're hiding. Making you move it shoulder
exclusive here today. I'd like to welcome back to the screen my brothers from another mother and my sister from another Mr. Benjamin Dixon, Dr. Carl Mack, and the Rebecca Azor.
I like that. I like that introduction. You know what? I'll take it. I'll take it. I don't like Dwayne, but I'll take the introduction. You're working on it, so I'll take it. Now,
are we still live? Are we still live or are we private?
No, we're keeping it live. We're keeping it live since, I tapped in a little late on the show today.
Listen, again, thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate you giving me space for that interview. That's my guy. Problem. We go back, way back.
Me spasa to spasa. I don't even think that's how you say space child in Spanish. But me spasa.
Why are you like this?
Anywho, it's a lot that I wanted to get covered. Well, not a lot, but enough that I want to get covered before we get out of here today. I did want to discuss Ryan Coogler, who we know who is the creator of the Black Panther saga. He is the director, and he was working on Black Panther 2. We've been wanting a sequel to Black Panther, but he's been working on Black Panther 2 here in Atlanta, and he was briefly detained by police in Atlanta back in January. We were just hearing about it, but back in January after he was mistaken for a bank robber at a Bank of America, according to a police report filed Wednesday. The director confirmed the incident to Variety. This situation should never have happened, he said. However, Bank of America worked with me and addressed it to my satisfaction, and we have since moved on. Coogler was detained and handcuffed after he went to Bank of America to make a transaction on January 7th, according to the Atlanta police report. The 35-year-old director, who was wearing a hat, sunglasses, and a COVID face mask, went to the counter, handed the bank teller a withdrawal slip with a note written on the back that's reportedly read. I need y'all to know that reportedly read because we don't trust everybody. I would like to withdraw $12,000 cash from my checking account. Please do the money count somewhere else because I'd like to be discreet. So in that particular moment, the teller misinterpreted the situation. I don't know why they're using the word misinterpreted here, but misinterpreted the situation as an attempted robbery when the amount of the transaction exceeded $10,000 and triggered an alert notification from Coogler's bank account. The teller then informed her boss that she suspected it was a robbery attempt, and together they called the police. 4 Atlanta Police Department officers arrived at the scene and detained 2 of Coogler's colleagues who were waiting for him outside the bank in a car with the engine running. They informed the officers who Coogler was and what he was wearing, which matched the description of the man suspected of robbing the bank. Coogler's colleagues were detained in the back of the police vehicle, and Coogler was then handcuffed and taken out of the bank by 2 of the officers. After verifying his identity and his Bank of America account, the officers released him and his colleagues. You guys, I know that, some people are saying it's not all the hype. I mean, he walked in there with the face mask, even though the face mask is to protect him. He slid a note to the lady, possibly because she couldn't read his lips and because he is a celebrity. He's a celebrity director in the middle of Atlanta going to a bank trying to withdraw over $10,000. I don't know. But anywho, I feel like in this moment, what can we say about this? I feel like people can't walk in no bank, not even in Atlanta, right? Atlanta's supposed to be what? Them little black Hollywood.
Wakanda.
We can't even walk into no bank, right? Wakanda. That's what T.I. said, and I don't believe that. I ain't with all that. But, we can't even walk into a bank and say, I need over $10,000 because aren't black folks supposed to be successful out here? Isn't that supposed to be a normality out here in Atlanta? The truth is, it's like a societal thing. You see a black person walking in somewhere and they're asking for something, and because we can't see their eyes, we can't see their face, they're a possible bank robber. I remember myself, and I, a cute little thing coming to Atlanta for the first time in my first year here, and I walked into the bank. I happened to have some eye irritation. I went to the doctor, and they were telling me I had a slight case of pink eye. I needed to get some dollars out of my bank account. I had just moved here. I had some glasses on because I felt like I looked like a crazy person. Walked into the bank, the lady, and it was sunglasses. It was a sunny, hot day outside. And she told me, after working with the lady next to me, and I thought, okay, she had sunglasses on too, so let me keep my sunglasses on as well. She said to me, you need to take off your sunglasses. In the rudest manner, I said, why? She said, I can't help you if you do not take off your sunglasses. Child, I did take off the sunglasses, and I was just, listen, my little behind, I was broke. I was just taking out a good little $25 out of my account, so leave an extra $5 behind. So, but I had took off the glasses, and she saw what my eyes were looking like, and she needed to apologize. She knew she was her because I was looking crazy, but she was just like, oh, okay, let me just
put it back on.
Yeah.
Put it back on.
Being black and having money or not, but being black and banking is problematic too. I see it's problematic. But anyway, what is your take, you guys?
So Queen, listen. You pass the deposit slip on there. It's got your account number. Before you start supposing that this is a bank robbery, all you had to do was put the man's account number in there and see that he got like $400 million in there and 12,000. Looks like his account. So see, I don't just excuse that away. Now, I will give you a situation of when I was president of NAACP. A black woman walked into a bank. Another sister had written her a check for $35. Sister passed the check on there. The teller thought that she had forged the check. So they did the same thing, called security, took the sister, and this is during the holiday time, so the bank is crowded with folks. $35. Took the sister in the back room and told her that she had forged this check. Now, all they had to do was look at they asked the sister her account number. She gave them her account number, gave her the check number, all these things. Now, the sister who wrote the check to her, she called her and got her on the phone. The bank security is talking to the woman who wrote the check. She said, give me the security said, give me your check number. Gave her the check number, the account number, everything that a reasonable person would say, yes, I'm speaking to the person who wrote this check. Instead, the bank security hung up on the woman who wrote the check and kept the sister locked up. And then finally, somebody from the bank walked past the room and saw the sister in there. And the sister had picked up the phone to call 911. Then they hung up that phone call. So the sister went back crying after hours of being detained. Her grandmama said, baby, you need to call Carl Mack and NAACP. And trust and believe, the bank came down with their big lawyers, and I told them, in order to resolve this situation, I want you to give that sister $1,000 for every dollar she tried to cash in that bank. The lawyer looked at me and said, so you want us to give her $35,000? I said, your math is good. I said, but I'm going to tell you this. You got 24 hours to get back with me. Otherwise, you're going to have my black ass outside your bank, along with all my other folks, talking about the nonsense that's going on in this bank. And furthermore, the sister who wrote the check, I want you to give her $1,000 for every dollar she wrote against her account. They said, Mr. Mack, that's another $35,000. I said, boy, your math is good. Now, they ended up giving the sister who went in the bank $35,000, but the sister who wrote the check, they gave her like $10,000. So it don't matter. This is another case of banking while black.
Come on.
When was the last
That's what I'm saying. We can't even bank while black. What you said, Dwayne?
When was the last time y'all heard of, even in movies, a black bank robber?
Well,
in The Harder They Fall.
Takers.
The Harder They Fall, but that was like in the back in the days.
Back in the Wild West days when everybody was a bank robber. But
Takers.
We don't do that.
Idris Elba.
Yeah, we don't do that. But they won't just rob no regular bank. They was out there getting millions. They won't out there trying to get 12,000 out the doggone bank.
We trying to get money. Let me tell you, I saw this recent video of a woman who had given it was a Capital One bank, I believe. She had walked in, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm trying to play this by memory. And I'm sleepy too, so just work with me here. She walked into the bank, gave a check, and I felt her pain at this moment. She said, I want to go ahead and I want to deposit this check, or I want to cash this check, excuse me. And they said, okay, sure. They looked at her account, realized that one of her accounts were in the negatives, but maybe like a few, maybe like 35, and they doubled it, I think, something like that. They done cashed her check, but gave her less, even though she signed to just have that check cashed. They took part of that check and deposited it into
Her
accounts that were like overdraft or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
She was so frustrated because you don't know where that money was going. You don't know. Right. She came here for one transaction. She did not tell you guys told her to take that money, to put it in these other accounts that she ain't dealing with right now. Right now, this is not what she's dealing with. She don't want the fees, so she didn't go to a check cashing store. She came right to her bank to get the free, right? To get it cashed for the free. And the man behind there said, you know what, I'm not even going to let her know. I'm going to take her dollars and I'm going to utilize that to put over here where it's like a $35 fee or whatever for whatever account. She jumped over. I don't know what spirit got up into her. But baby, it almost was like, oh, you will not. I need that money. She kept saying, give me my check. Give me my check. He was like, ma'am, I will not. Ma'am, I will not. She's like, give me my check. Ma'am, I can't. Oh, that little window, it was nothing. It was nothing to her. When you know you need that money, when you know there's a bill that is looking for you, when you know groceries depend on that, when you know the gas depend, you going over. She literally politely moved that over and got up on that table, went behind the banker's teller's desk.
I understand.
The register, got her check. She got her check. And said, don't mess with me, and walked around her as if she was leaving the job from an 8-hour shift, walked out that front door, and that was the end of it. You see what I'm saying? You can't. They abuse black bankers all the time. If I came in here and I told you I'm here for one transaction, I didn't approve any other transaction. It is not. You cannot take it upon yourself as a teller trying to do 6 jobs for this bank who will replace you if you were to die tomorrow. It is not for you to go ahead and approve something that I didn't say approve. I want to cash this check. Just cash the damn check. And that's what it is. Now, black bankers can't go in saying, I want to, I want to take out some money over $10,000. You may possibly be a bank robber because you are black, you have a hoodie on, you have glasses on, and you have this mask on. It is problematic. But if a white person were to go in there and look as such, it wouldn't be really questionable.
Did he not pass his ID to her, to this teller? This tells me that she didn't even bother reading, because she's from Atlanta. I wonder if she was black. Maybe she's not black.
Probably because she black. Look, she got a hair tie on.
Did she not read the name on the ID that says Ryan Coogler?
Look at them, all black. The disgrace. Embarrassing.
Did she not check the bank account to see that he's worth?
Right. That's all I'm saying. If I pass a check on, if I pass a deposit slip on, the first thing that I'm looking for you to do is to put my account number into your system. And when you see that I'm asking for $12,000 and I only got $1,200 in there, that's when you go,
that's a robbery. That's a sticker.
No, not even a robbery. All you say is, sir, you have insufficient funds. I can't give you $12,000. It's that simple. It's over. But no, she didn't even look, because I'm sure if she looked into his account, she would have saw that $1,200 million up in there. She'd been like $12,000. Yes.
And that's just one account, baby. That's just one account. If she would have clicked further into it, she would have seen the other accounts. Listen, this one's just a rainy day account. This one is just for the kids. This one is just for my house, one of my 10 houses. Like, don't play with folks. If y'all keep walking around here saying that, white people don't dress rich because they know what's up, and you got this man just in a hoodie and whatever the case may be. But see, what we do, that's what I don't like. I don't like that. I don't like that, Dr. Mack. I don't like that. I don't like that, Ben. I don't like when they be saying stuff like, black people always flossing when they dressing up and all that stuff. They trying to show that they rich or whatever the case may be. But when a black man is just dressed like whatever, just like a regular day, going in to go and literally saying, I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get sick. I'm going to definitely cover my face. There's still a pandemic out here. And so that the teller can understand what I'm saying, I'm going to write it down, because I understand that she may not be able to read my lips or hear what I'm saying because of my mask. Let me go ahead and slide her this. And I'm also a celebrity. So I want her to understand, hey, I just want this to be discreet. Also, I'm in the middle of Atlanta. I don't want them knowing that I'm cashing out this amount of money, walking out the door with it. And it's problematic because I'm in the hood.
Yeah, Rebecca, you just stimulated a thought there. she would not have responded as if it was a robbery if Ryan Coogler had come in trapping, if he had come in making it rain, making a scene like a rapper. Like if he came in making a big scene like, hey, I'm going to take out my money, then she would have done what she should have done anyway, which is look at the ID, verify the account, and saw he had that money, and then she would have been like, "Hey,
Offset from Migos,
make it rain."
That's T-Pain. Yes, that's such
but because the brother came in like an average brother, this must be a robbery. Ain't that some stuff? Ain't that something when Black people become the most efficient executors of white supremacy?
And see, being to the point when we had Professor Reed on, when he was talking about his experiences were with Black cops, that just speaks to the culture of it. And that's what America has done so well. It has instituted a culture that is so oppressive that even some Black folks will get in there and start exercising that same type of nonsense. Now, given that you all are in Atlanta, all one got to do is look at the music industry, right? How many artists were taken advantage of because of their talent and left penniless? And now you got some of our folks who are now gotten in positions that they can help promote these young artists, and they're doing the exact same thing to them.
That's right.
Come on, man. Come on.
It's a whole fool, nothing but a fool, always gonna be a fool. And I think that it's very systemic. You know, I even, I don't know if I told you guys, because I always let y'all in my business every 5 weeks, but, I'm getting to know a person of the law, and I don't really sit right with my spirit, so I don't know if it's going to be the same next week. But he tells me how, you know, it's literally systemic. They teach him how to be with the Black inmates. You know, they teach him how to talk to the Black inmates, or, you know, the people on the street when he's surveying a certain area. He has to be a certain kind of way. But I'm like, how are you a Black officer? And he gets it right. He's like, I'm not an officer, I'm a sheriff. But how are you this? And the Blackest area that you're working in is telling you how to be racist, I guess, oppressive to your own. I don't like it. And he's like, I don't like it either. So I do something different, and I get in trouble for doing something different. And if I don't abide by what they tell me, I will be fired or whatever the case may be. And he's told me about other people who have been in law enforcement who have done something, and instead of the law enforcement coming to that person's defense, and it's a person of color, well, let me say it's a Black person, instead of them, they literally put them in solitary and treat them like whatever. And, you know, even though they have to, because in those environments, you know, if the people know that you're part of law enforcement, it's problematic, but they treat them like just regular. But we see what happens when them folks, so they be out on the streets, they be free. We see what happens when them folks who was white working in law enforcement and how they get protection. It's just problematic, because I feel like Atlanta really be trying to cape when they be saying we're the Blackest and we do this and we do that. But if you really go downtown, if you really go down to Midtown, it ain't that Black. If you really go there, you see that there's a lot of changes happening. If you really go down there, you see that a lot of the Blackness that the people assume is here, it's still functioning in systematic oppression. Capitalism.
But Queen, to that point, that's why you got Black law enforcement organizations like Noble. That's why they're toothless, clawless, useless. You know, these Black law enforcement agencies, they sit around these organizations, they go in there, they have their conferences. For what? You're not protecting brothers and sisters in law enforcement. You're not fighting against a culture that is indoctrinating young monkeys to do the same type of nonsense that your white brethren do. You'll forego, while we put you there to bring some level of understanding to our community, you will forego that to have that blue blood injected in you to please your white brethren.
Yeah, and that's a problem.
Like it or not.
Like it or not. And we'll discuss that further, because I mean, I live out here. I used to live literally in the heart of, of Buckhead. And, I had to move further and further away to reverse gentrify some areas because it's become really expensive.
I'll call you right back.
Who calling us, Dr. Mac?
Oh, that's Mama. Oh, that's Mama.
Okay, look, because I said who else
There it
is
is.
Queen, child. I need to know who is calling us, Dr. Mac, on the show. Hey, Mama.
That was Mama. I said, Mama,
Okay.
I'm talking to the Queen and Ben. She goes, oh, the Queen? Call me right back.
Yes, Mama. Okay, listen. Hey, Mama. Anywho, we are at the end of the show. We could definitely take it there. I got some things I want to cover on tomorrow, but before we leave and get Dr. Mac talking to his most beautiful mama, who acknowledges the Queen, child. I wanted to read at least one of the women's history that Dr. Mac has dropped. If we can get one of those on the screen, I don't know, surprise me. Which one are we dropping today? Maxine Mims. All right, look, because I got to go into my messages because it's not in order. So while we're talking about Maxine Mims, go ahead and give us an introduction, Dr. Mac, on Maxine Mims.
So Dr. Maxine Mims, actually.
Doctor.
She was born in Virginia. And when she went to school at Hampton. So she got a chance to see, and her family were Black activists. So she used to watch her mother open her home and invite Black women into her kitchen, sit around the table and discuss Black women issues and then work to resolve those types of issues. And so when she went to Hampton, she again got to hear fiery Black folks talking about Black equality. So when she moved to the state of Washington is when I got a chance to meet Dr. Mims. Dr. Mims then left Seattle after doing some work and worked nationally in the field of education, but then came back to Tacoma, and it's an area called the Hilltop area. And like her mama, she began to invite Black women in to talk about issues affecting Black women. And as a result, she started a college in Tacoma, Evergreen State College. And so that is the matriarch that we know as Dr. Maxine Mims. And she's always been a tremendous supporter of mine. And when I was in NAACP and people thought I was going too hard, Dr. Mims would always look at me and be like, baby, you do what you do. So I love it. So in this new calendar that I'm putting together in tribute to Black women, Dr. Maxine Mims is a sister that I hold in high regards, and a sister who just never bit her tongue, was never apologetic for pushing a Black agenda around Black women and the education of our people. That's Dr. Maxine Mims.
And I'll go ahead and read your writing, dedicated to Maxine Buie Mims. She's an educator, civil rights activist, a founder. Born in 1928, Maxine Buie was born on this day, on March 4th, in 1928 in Newport News, Virginia. Her daddy, Benson Ebenezer Buie, was influenced and followed the teachings of Black nationalist Marcus Garvey. Young Maxine was watching. Her mama, I love the way you write, Dr. Mac. Her mama, Isabella Buie, was a teacher, and it wasn't uncommon for her to teach neighboring adults to read and write at their kitchen table. Young Maxine was watching. From her parents, Maxine understood cultural pride and responsibility, human dignity, meeting people where they are, and helping, and educational excellence. Living close to Hampton University, young Maxine listened to many Black leaders. She received her bachelor's degree from Virginia Union University in 1950, her master's degree from Wayne State University in Detroit, and her doctorate from Union Graduate School in San Francisco in 1977. After her marriage to Jack Mims, the two moved to Seattle in 1953. Dr. Mims taught in Seattle, Kirkland, and Lecce before taking an administrative role within the Seattle Public School District in 1968. As director of an in-training service, she made sure teachers adequately supported children of color due to forced integration brought about by the murder of Dr. King, Bobby Kennedy, and pressure applied by the Seattle NAACP Corps and the Central Area Civil Rights Committee. In 1969, this effective leader took a position with the federal government, working as a special assistant to the director of the Labor of Women's Bureau, Elizabeth Duncan Kuntz. 3 years later, she returned to the Pacific Northwest, meeting folks where they are. Older Maxine gathered folks from the Hilltop area of Tacoma around her table. She classes in her home, just like Mama Dr. Mims. Homeschool grew to become the Evergreen State College Tacoma branch.
Wow.
She did a lot. She did a lot.
Wow.
All these women that you have been giving us information on, they're not just here with what they've done. They've done so many things. And I think it's so many that it's hard to really package into one. But you're able to do it, Dr. Mack, and help us literally read off their resumes and give them their flowers and love on them and, let people know exactly who they are. So I thank you for that. Thank you for introducing us to Dr. Maxine Mims. So we are at the end of the show, guys. It is 10:33. It's on Thursday. I love y'all so much. I am so tired, so I'm going to take it to bed, but I hope that you guys have a blessed day moving forward. Go and be great. Love you. Meet
in your lavender.
Tomorrow.
Love you, Queen. Love you, brother.
Bye, guys.
Appreciate you. Hey, take care. Love y'all more.